Hey everybody, Jimmy Smith again, this time with another history lesson, right? Some of you seem to enjoy it when I go back in time and talk about some stuff that a lot of people don't talk about now, right? Fighters that a lot of you don't remember, which is literally the point of this video. We're going to go over some fighters that you don't remember, or most fight fans don't remember. There might be some people in the comment section and go, oh yeah, I don't know all those people. Sure, great. You're probably an old person like me who's been in sport for a long time. But there are some fighters I wanted to go over to talk about that various levels of success, but most of them at the really high level with one exception. I'll explain that in a minute. Who were talented, really good at the top of their field, and they were legends while they were active. But since they have been inactive, history has kind of forgotten them. There are a few themes here. Number one is MMA is basically divided into pre-boom and post-boom, right? The Ultimate Fighter, 2004, when everything kicked off and went into high gear and MMA became huge. And before that, when it was still a niche sport, UFC didn't have a stranglehold on the sport in the United States, so fighters bounced around a lot. That's going to be a theme here too. And it was just a different era. And the fighters of that era just aren't remembered like the fighters of today. There. Now, some of these fighters do cross over into the boom, but a lot of them, by the time they got there, they were on the downside of their careers. So, to begin, one of my favorites, not just in MMA, also in jiu-jitsu, also as a human being, is one of the nicest guys ever in jiu-jitsu and MMA. I thought at the time he was the top lightweight in the world, Vitor Shaolin Ribeiro. Why don't you know who he is now? Part of the reason, as I said before, is he bounced around a lot. Part of success in MMA is being some promotion's guy, right? Be it Pride or the UFC or Strikeforce. The reason we know those names is some promotion got behind somebody. They had success there, and they were very, very visible. A lot of times, Josh Barnett is a great example of somebody who had success in the UFC, got popped, whatever, bounced around a lot, was never a promotion's number one guy. And so a lot of his success, a lot of his best years, spent making good money, but moving around a lot. So the problem is no promotion has a reason to promote you, and you might make more money, but you're not going to have the visibility of other fighters. I think that was Vitor Shaolin's problem. A champ in Shuto, by the way, my favorite organization of all time is Shuto in Japan. Unreal. Great lightweights. Anything below 70 was amazing in Shuto during its heyday in Japan. Started out in Shuto, beat guys like Joachim Hansen. He had the best arm triangle, by the way, ever in MMA. Unbelievable. Three-time world champion in jiu-jitsu. If you don't know him, is jiu-jitsu legend. Has been at the top of sports since he was 18 years old. But beat guys like Joe Hurley, beat Tetsuya Kawajiri, beat Joachim Hansen. Lost in a rematch to Kawajiri in 2004. After that, beat, Daisuke Nakamura. He beat Chris Brennan. He beat some great names in Japan, right? Japanese names that you might not remember. But incredible. Got to 19-1. That was July 2007. I thought at the time, best lightweight in the world. He's the one guy who BJ Penn went to the ground with him, you got a problem. Not that he'd submit BJ, but BJ ain't going to submit him. So it was one of those, I was like, oh my God, if these guys ever fought, it'd be the best jiu-jitsu battle ever. Had a good right hand, really physical, really solid, strong for 155 pounds. But lost to JZ Kabakachi in Heroes. In the first round, got knocked out very, very early. And that was kind of the beginning of the end. Had one win after that, then lost 3 in a row. Shinya Aoki, Lyle Bilbrom, and Justin Wilcox. Obviously, Shinya Aoki, an excellent name. Really good fighter. Losing to him, okay, wasn't necessarily the end, but Beerbaum, not necessarily great. Justin Wilcox called his fights in Bellator, not necessarily great. Lost 3 in a row and retired in 2010. But in his run, once again, 19-1 at one point, submitted frickin' everybody. Unbelievable fighter. Probably don't remember who he is. Next one, Paulo Filho. Now, Paulo Filho was one of those that was in a weight class that a lot of people liked. He was a middleweight. He beat a lot of big names. He did fight for some big shows, most notably Pride, back in the Bushido days. And he was an absolute monster. Had success in WEC, became champion there. But had some serious problems when it came to his mental health, drug addiction, all that stuff. He is from my lineage, meaning he's a Carlson Gracie guy, so I know people that train with him. They went strong, powerful, really, really good on the ground, but he had some issues, and they really kept him from succeeding at the elite level. And some of those successes he had early were in spite of a lot of problems where, yeah, we cleaned him up, got him ready for the fight, and he was able to beat guys. And even though he was, dope sick or whatever the deal was, he was still able to get up there and fight. So a lot of that success against big names was in spite of the fact that he was having drug problems and mental health problems. So his record at one point, 16-0. Chael Sonnen beat him by armbar. At the time, by the way, I'm going to delve into this a little bit. Chael was one of those guys who was known for winning a fight and then falling to a submission late. Paulo Filho, Jeremy Horn did it. Babalu did it to him. He just had this problem. Everybody knows the Anderson Silva fight of doing well in a fight and then stumbling and falling to a submission. And that's what happened against Paulo Filho. He beat Murillo Hua, who was Shogun Hua's brother. Amar Sula, a very, very tough fighter, beat him. Akira Shoji, who fought a ton in Pride. He just had a great submission game, great armbar, big for the weight class, really, really tough. The rematch with Chael Sonnen. Some people who are old school might remember this one, WEC 36, Faber versus Brown. He just had a mental collapse in the fight, like really talking to himself, doing nothing, muttering. He was having a freak out mentally. And I talked to Chael about this one time. And he said, I remember saying, like, dude, I'm not going to hurt you. Let's just, I'm going to throw some jabs at you and I'm going to do some stuff and get you out of here and I'll win. And to hear that from Chael, who is normally like, oh, you're having a mental breakdown? I'm going to beat you right into the canvas. He literally told me, he goes, like in the middle of the fight, I kind of agreed. We agreed. Like, okay, you just keep walking around and we'll kind of go through this show and then I'll take the belt and you get some help. That's how bad it was. That Chael Sonnen felt bad for the guy in the middle of a fight. Even after that, he beats Melvin Manoff. He had a draw with Dennis Kang. Very, very tough at the time. Then at the end, as he's bouncing around to smaller shows, he starts losing. One win in his last, I think, 7 or 8 fights. So great in his prime, really, really tough, but had some mental issues that kept him from crossing over right when the boom was happening in the early 2000s, where obviously if he wins the WC title, when that's absorbed by the UFC, he would have been a top middleweight there, but he kind of lost and had his breakdown at the exact wrong time to keep him from going to that next level. But in his prime, God, Paulo Filho was a fantastic fighter. Here's one. If you remember this guy, extra bonus points, because his moments in Pride in the UFC came at the end of his career, and he was a shadow of what he used to be before that. Jason Black finished his career 23-4-1, but at one point, he was, I think, 19-0-1. Had a draw against Antonio McKee in a fight. Don't look it up. It's the most boring fight I've ever seen in my life. But this was a guy at the local scene. I remember seeing him fight like Extreme Challenge and stuff, and, World Fighting Alliance where he fought Antonio, and just mopping the floor with that, like, mid-level talent, that local talent. Usually a guy like that moves up. I remember seeing Diego Sanchez fight at King of the Cage and going, okay, this guy's going to be something. Kyle Parisian saw him at King of the Cage and went, oh, okay, this guy's going to be something special. And Jason Black had the numbers, but he never got there. And we're waiting and waiting and waiting. As I said, 19 or 17-0-1, and didn't get there. And by the time he did, he was too old. He lost to Shoney Carter. He had an arm injury. Minute into his fight with Shoney Carter. That was the first loss of his career. Goes to Pride and goes 1-1. He gets submitted by Shinya Aoki. He was just too old. By the time he got there, he was in his early 30s. And his schedule, by the way, if you want to know what fighting was like in the early 2000s, in 2000, he has 7 pro fights. 7 fights in 2000. He has, 5 in 2001? 6? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. He has 6 fights in 2001. He was on a murderous schedule, and I think that early in his career wore him down a bit. 3 times in 2006, 3 times in 2007. The guy just fought too freaking much, and it may have worn him down. There's a sweet spot in combat sports where you're getting the experience, but you're not worn down by the minutes in the cage yet. And Jason Black's trajectory just didn't work. He got, a great record. He was doing really well, but he was fighting so much that by the time he got the call to the big show, I don't know how much physically he had left. Went to the UFC, performed terribly in the UFC, went 0-2, Lost to Thiago Tavares by triangle, and then lost to Matt Grice by split decision. He just didn't have it by then. And so the reason I include Jason Black in this is he's always my example of you have to get to the big show by a certain time, or else, you're spending your best days in the amateurs. You're spending your best days in the B leagues, and your body just won't be ready when the time comes. So Jason Black, perfect example of that, but a great fighter back in the day. There you go. One of my favorites, Egor Vovchanchyn. Anybody? Egor Vovchanchyn? Cool. All right. Maybe you remember, maybe you don't. Fearsome heavyweight. Incredible power. He knocked out a guy named Francisco Bueno, and for years, Pride used that as their, highlight video. Every, Pride thing had Egor Vovchanchyn versus Francisco Bueno. He hits the guy with an overhand right, and this gigantic heavyweight just goes stiff as a board and goes whoosh, like a sequoia. Egor moves out of the way, and the guy just falls face down, eyes wide shut, and it's over. Egor had that kind of power. Very small heavyweight, by the way. 5'7", 5'8", something like that. But just built that he was that wide. And he just had gigantic fists, and he was the first guy to do what became known as the Russian hook, which is this huge leaping overhand right, and he would throw them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, like Fedor did. But he was smaller than Fedor. Chuck Liddell, people don't remember when Chuck Liddell first started throwing that, we all called it the Russian hook. It's this loopy turning overhand. Egor was the first guy to really throw it in MMA. And at one point, he was 46-3-1. He lost to Mark Coleman in the finals of the Pride Grand Prix in 2000. On the way there, he had smashed Ear Goodrich, beat Kazushi Sakuraba, took on Mark Coleman. What happened is Mark Coleman got him cornered and got in a position where he could throw knees, because you do that in Pride, and got Egor trapped. And Egor couldn't move and ended up tapping out to the, I remember him tapping on his stomach, tapping out to the knees. But even after that, beats Mark Kerr, beats Enson Inoue, who was too tough for his own good in that fight, by the way. The guy just had incredible skills when it came to his stand-up. The game moved past him a little bit. He started trading off wins and losses after losing to Zen Mario Sperry. By the way, got submitted by Mario Sperry. And that was, and Trey Telligman. Do you remember him? He's the guy with one peck. Vitor Belfort crushed him. He went over to Pride and beat Egor in a big upset. After that, it was kind of win some, lose some. There were a couple reasons here, right? Number one is he was always small for a heavyweight, and just big physical heavyweights became too much for him at a certain point. Also, the reason he retired is he started getting stress fractures in his hands. He couldn't hit anymore. And it makes sense. When you watch the guy punch, he committed everything to every punch. Well, it destroys your hands after a while. So physically, he started breaking down, and the division started moving past him. Had a little run at light heavyweight, what they called middleweight in Pride. But by then, by the time he slimmed down to a weight class that made a little more sense for his size, it was too late. He had been through too much, lost to Overeem, lost to Nakamura, got viciously knocked out at heavyweight by Mirko Cro Cop. That was a bad one. So, but in his prime, my God, he was just absolutely fearsome. And retired with a record of 56-10. 56-10-1. But incredible fighter at the time, Egor Vovchanchyn. And he doesn't really get the respect these days that I thought he would get having watched him live. These were all people, by the way. Other than Jason Black, only fought really at the local level when I was watching him. And even to him, I thought, man, he's going to be great, and never got there. The others, I thought, were great at the elite level, and I thought, man, we're going to be talking about these guys for a while. And it's kind of the nature of MMA that, and combat sports, period, that certain people slip through the cracks. And I thought Egor Vovchanchyn, Vitor Shaolin, Paulo Filho, definitely those guys. Man, in their prime, they were great. But their prime didn't extend into an era where they get the recognition they deserve. So, have any ideas of fighters you want me to cover in this particular segment? Fighters that people don't really remember or appreciate anymore. Let me know in the comments section. Subscribe if you get a chance. I'll talk to you soon.